Hi, humans. Just a quick note that this episode contains conversations around abuse, substance misuse, pediatric terminal illness, and cancer. This warning is simply to empower you with the knowledge you need to make healthy decisions about how and if you should consume this podcast content. As always, we trust you with you.
This is Good Girl Gone Human, an ongoing conversation that serves the frequency of rehumanization. We believe that in striving towards being good and away from being bad, we can lose touch with our humanity and uniqueness. Our hope is that in expanding our capacity to accept our own humanity, we expand the capacity to accept and hold each other's humanity as well.
We welcome uncertainty and questions with curiosity. This is not a roadmap for the right way to be human. We hold tenderly how seductive and human it is to reach for a formula that will provide a sense of certainty and safety. This is not that place, but rather a place for dropping into our big, messy questions.
This isn't just for the recovering good girls out there, but for every human who desires to peel off the layers that hide the wholeness of who they are.
We want to tell the stories of how messy and complicated and beautiful it is to find ourselves in the aftermath of this shedding. There is space for your story, and we want you to join us on this journey of rehumanization. Hi, humans. Hi, Holly.
Hi.
Welcome back to another episode of Good Girl Gone Human. We are so excited today because we are joined by a really special guest, Claire Margit. Hi, Claire.
Hi.
How are you
Hi.
today?
I'm in heaven.
We are too. We're so excited. Claire is an Instagram friend turned real friend right now.
Yes.
She found our podcast just through a mutual friend, which is so fun, and reached out to us and found a lot of resonance in the work that we're both doing. And so we're really excited to have her on. Claire is a massage therapist, a writer. She's a teacher. She's a parent. She's a human, just like us. And so her work that she does is really deep and meaningful and very personal to her, but also is so in line. You know, we just were talking before we started recording about how comforting it is to know that we're all doing this work together. And so Holly and I are just feeling elated and grounded and excited to see what Claire brings this morning. So thank you, Claire.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm so happy I'm here. I'm so happy to be human with you.
Yay. Oh, just so grateful and know little bits of your story, and just it feels like truly a gift to be able to sit with you and hear even more details. So to start, I am curious, like you did find our Instagram and reach out, and we were wondering, we were talking yesterday, as we've gotten to know you, some of our languaging with good, hard, good girl gone human, like there's some word play, and I'm wondering, like, when you saw our Instagram handle, Good Girl Gone Human, like what was that experience like for you? Can you first talk to us about like the resonance you felt there?
Yes, I can. So Good Girl Gone Human. So my whole thing is humanity, that all we can be is human, and so I'm gonna be that, and I'm gonna be that all the way. And I actually love the word good. Good. The word good to me almost always has a capital G, because it implies this like holiness, um, that like God called it all good in the garden, right? And so good catches my eye all the time. Good girl catches my eye because I have 10 years of what it means and looks like to embody being a good girl. On and it's kind of the wordplay, you guys are deconstructing good. You're saying I don't have to be a good girl, and I'm saying the same thing, but just that it's inherent. I am because I am, right? So I liked that. I liked that there was some wordplay there for me on my part. And then like I said, the human thing, human, hummus, earth, mud, dirt, but in the most perfect way. Gardeners, I'm out in my garden all the time. Soil, Don't get me started on soil.
You can. I'm here for it.
Oh my God, soil. Yeah. So what an honor to be soil, to be human, to be a just a bunch of cells together living this
Beautiful.
experience.
Yeah.
That yeah.
No, that's super helpful. It's yes, we are deconstructing the word good. And along my journey, I don't know about you, Christina, but I've actually found a lot of comfort in like I was born inherently good. Because I was like raised to believe that like babies are born sinful, and that's like a really gross thing to say. So it's like we're not fully like ew good blah. We're like human. You know, I would love to sit with you in that space of like what that inherent goodness looks like in your work, in your life, in your
Yeah.
story.
I think it's so funny how like when I went to a private Christian school for much of my life
Same girl.
and kind of left the church 7 to 10 years ago when I got sober and like met God, right? Like it was like, oh shoot, this is what's really happening for me.
Cool.
Um, that idea of the original sin, or this idea that humans have this flaw that is, I think it's just our humanity. That's just right. And we were at some point they decided that they hated their humanity so much that they had to call it sin or make it a problem or reject it. And I'm not going to reject that shadow and that hard. Then that's the good hard, right? In my I'm not going to reject my hard. I'm going to be good, and I'm going to be hard, and I'm going to be human.
Yeah.
So,
It's so cool. We're like saying the same things
I know.
in such parallel ways. Like Good Girl Gone Human is can we embrace our humanity without having to put it in these narrow categories of good or bad. I love that perspective of maybe sin was just hating on our human.
Yeah. Like, dude, we're all just here in this, like, we're just trying, no one's trying to fuck up.
Yeah.
We're trying the best we can. Truly.
Truly.
Just
Yeah.
varying degrees of wounded, not
Oof.
wicked.
Yes, that's the word that comes to me a lot with original sin. It's like, or sin in general is just like, yeah, there's trauma, there's hurt. We're not saying like everything's hunky dory, but
No.
even, we are good and hard. Life is good and hard. Like, I just think we're not saying one or the other doesn't exist. We're acknowledging that they both do, but we don't want to be confined by either.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so that's
Yes.
our language of like expanding to hold the whole spectrum, of our
Yeah.
humanity.
Yeah. No, that was like super that was a big turning point for me when I was able to hold, I had made some really unloving choices. I had broken a lot of peace in my addiction and my misuse, my substance misuse. And I had been on the receiving end of a lot of abuse and a lot of trauma and a lot of hard in my childhood, by my mom specifically. And then as a mom myself, having broken the same piece that she broke, in that healing journey, when I went to rehab, when I did all that, having to really sit with like, oh God, if she's wounded, if I'm wounded, not wicked, right? I put my son in the NICU. Have we talked about that? That my addiction, I put my son in the NICU.
Could
Yeah.
you like expand? Do you feel comfortable expanding?
Yeah. We can
Cool.
talk about that if you want.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, we'd love to hear like more of your
Yeah,
story.
you did mention
Just
that
dive
to
in.
us. So yeah, tell us what that
That's
was
kind of
like.
that's where it started.
Yeah.
That was the turning, right? It's rehab. And I like I say, when I talk, it's like most moms, I'm thinking of Glennon and Anne Lamott, these stories of most people get pregnant and they stop using their drug of choice. I got pregnant and I doubled down because of just the context. It was my third child that I wasn't supposed to have after this bone marrow transplant, and I had horrific, debilitating pain, and I was somehow pregnant again, and like couldn't abort these babies because they're miracles, but like also, how do I do this? So many shoulds, so many layers, so many projections and stories. And then my third, my son was born and had withdrawal symptoms, and everything I did was prescription, these pain docs. I say I'm a survivor of the opioid epidemic too, not just cancer. He was born, and I remember looking at him in this little plastic bassinet. And my husband's here. There's nurses all around, and he has this team of people who's helping him get better. And he's warm and he's safe and he's loved, right? And I looked at my husband and I said, I think I need something. I need what he has right here. I need that. And I said, I need to go to rehab. Like I might start tearing up.
I'm with you. Right?
Yeah.
I need to go to rehab. I need help, So I mean, I hurt a child. I hurt my child, and then yeah, well, we can talk about that. So I go to rehab. If you haven't been to rehab, you have to go to rehab. Oh my God, my husband, when we talk
10 out of 10 recommend.
What?
I feel like we need to put that on a shirt. If you haven't been to rehab, you have to try.
Have to try it.
Have to go. No,
Wow.
it was
Why?
Oh yeah, well, because my husband says we speak at rehabs now together, and because addiction's a family disease, and he says when he talks about it that he walked through the doors and it was like he could exhale for the first time in his life.
Wow.
And just spending like the first 30 minutes there of intake, there was a palpable difference in the energy and the vibe, because nobody in those rooms were pretending. Nobody was pretending.
Yeah.
I know. Nobody was pretending. Everyone knew they were fucked up.
Yeah, you can't,
and
right?
Yeah, I love that room, honestly. That's my kind of room.
Are either of you in recovery?
No.
Or like,
but
okay, that's okay. But
yeah, I know people, and so I've heard a lot of stories, and same thing, just like the humility of saying, like, there's no pretending here, like I'm better than anybody or worse than anybody. We're all like swimming. I'm human.
We're all human here. I don't have to be anything other than that. So I did rehab. I did outpatient, and then that's where it's like, oh God, now I'm here. I've been running from abuse, and I had a sister who was dying for 10 years of pediatric brain cancer, and I have a bio dad and a dad I thought was my dad until I was 7, and married and divorced 3, just like fractured home and family, and I had been, and then cancer once at 19 and cancer again at 23 with a 5-week-old, just like wave after wave after wave of death and destruction and suffering and trauma. So there was a lot, a lot to unpack there. And of course of course I used meds and, behaviors.
I was just going to say.
Of course you did. Yeah.
Yeah, of course. It was food as a kid. It was relationships. If I can text this guy, then I won't have to feel this feeling. If I, all those things, whatever. And then the healing started. And so I guess kind of the turning point was rehab, was sobriety, was chemical sobriety, emotional sobriety, behavioral sobriety, just really having to sit with, this is what's happening. I can't run. I love what Glennon Doyle says. She says, sobriety is just not abandoning oneself when you don't abandon yourself. And so I love that quote. So yeah, I didn't abandon myself. And then when you stop abandoning yourself, you get to know yourself. And when you get to know yourself, you get to know what you need. And when you get to know what you need, you can fill those needs. And then you become like a whole human. But a big part, I think we were talking about the wounded, not wicked thing. That's what got us started down this. Does that sound
We'll follow any trail wherever you take us, Claire. But yes, that's where we started. Yeah.
Story, yeah.
I mean, that was a big deal for me in reconciling my good and my hard parts, because I like I said, I had wounded one of my children, and then my rage, I have complex PTSD, have whatever, and like maybe borderline, I don't know, because they're all windy and twisty.
Sure.
But I was I was meditating and really struggling to forgive and accept my own mom for what she had done to me and to all of us, to the whole family. And I go into my meditation. I call it resourcing. It's similar to EMDR, like resourcing, but maybe a little different. And I close my eyes and I kind of sink in. And then my mom, I'm sitting on my sofa, like in my mind, right? And my mom walks through the door. And at this point, we hadn't spoken for probably 2 years. We didn't speak for the first 6 years of my sobriety, my recovery. And we were cordial now. But at that point, it was like, mom, not safe, scary, run, leave, right? Um, and so I'm in this meditation. I look at her and I want to peace out. I want to just leave. And she's in this cloak and she's like cloaked. And I'm like, okay, that's interesting. That's new. And she starts to untie the cloak and this robe falls off of her. This like thing falls off of her. And all I see is just huge wounds on her body, like necrotic ooze and so much pain. Like makes me tear up right now. I could see how much pain my abuser was in her whole life, right? Like she had been abused. She had been fucked. Can I say fuck?
Sure. Oh yeah.
Okay.
Fuck
okay,
yeah.
Cool.
We got a little we've got a little E next to all of our, episodes.
I love that
carry
word
on.
Personally.
Okay.
Yeah, that moment.
She was oozing. She was human. She was trying the best she could. She had a dying daughter.
Yeah.
She had parents who wounded her and had no tools. And I couldn't excuse her behavior because those are real wounds she put on my body, right? But if I'm rejecting her wounds and her humanity, I'm simultaneously rejecting my own. And so I can't heal if I'm rejecting her humanity. I can't hold that I'm good in heart and human if I'm rejecting that she's good in heart and human. And that was a big...
Wow, Claire.
Yeah, that was a big moment.
So,
and then it was like, all right, I guess that's what we're doing here.
So was that was a meditation while you were in rehab? Am I understanding correctly?
No, I had been home. So I did 1 week
You
inpatient
did a week. Okay.
because I had this newborn and 2 other children and, whatever. Yeah. And then I did 6 weeks of outpatient and you're just kind of raw dogging it at that point. It's like, all right, like, whoa, this is what it's like to be alive. Okay.
Jeez, yeah.
And then just, then I dove head first into beautiful resources and books and all, Anne Lamott and Richard Rohr and Glennon Doyle and Jungian depth psychology and so that was, I had a therapist, actually the same therapist who asked, have you ever gotten a massage? Taught me a technique that my psyche just really loved, and so cool. I got a lot of good wisdom, and that was in like probably the first 2 years of recovery for me. It was just like stuff like that all the time.
I just want to say how brave that was to have that newborn and be like, I need help. That those first 6 weeks are like terrible when you're not also up against an addiction and dealing with the mom guilt you were, seeing your son suffer. And I don't know, in our one of the guests we also had this season, I told her, you're brave. She was like, I was just surviving. So maybe you're like, there was no choice as well. But that is super powerful. Then also what's sitting with me really heavily is there are plenty of people in all of our family lines that were abused and continue to abuse. So you stopped it. You with your body and your soul said, this is my hard.
Yeah.
And I'm going to go to rehab and then I'm going to chew and swallow it, all of the resources. And I'm just
well, that's what we're all doing, right? That's why what you guys are doing is so special and so important is that you're you're helping the language of humanity. Like you're helping the evolution of the human heart for real. Yeah.
Well, I love
It
yours.
is. I mean, I say I would rather get cancer again than get sober again.
Wow.
It is the most courageous thing I think you can do. There was a fireman at my one of the he graduated while I was in my outpatient. He goes like, I run into burning buildings every day, and you all, like us, this group of people are the most courageous group of people I know. And so yeah, it is. But I think we all just not abandoning oneself is the
Yeah.
most courage. And courage means to take heart. It's listening to your heart. Core
Yeah.
is heart.
I have a question around.
Yeah. Sorry, I got the lilac.
Oh yeah. So
I
you're good.
I have
Oh
a lot
my
of
goodness.
drainage from all the lilac.
Yeah. You mentioned sort of towards the beginning that you left religion in a certain way when you got sober. So I'm curious if you could talk a bit more about if getting sober was learning to not abandon yourself. How was your spirituality affected by that? Because my story personally was like I abandoned
like
myself
that, yeah.
in Christianity. So I don't want to project my story onto you. So I'm just like curious about like for me, my coming home was like a similar gather all the resources. I don't want to numb. I want to heal. But losing like the dogmatic Christianity was the only way I could not abandon myself. And I just find I'm just feel very curious about like that was the point in your story that your spirituality changed. Could you like tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, yeah, totally. So I was it's an interesting story. I was born into a home that was not a Christian home. My sister was diagnosed with brain cancer when she was young, like 5. She was 5. Um, and she she started waking up in the middle of the night and saying, God told me we have to go to church. And so there's no, right, like
No
we're like, okay,
context. Yeah.
that must be like morphine or something,
Mm.
and we lived in Malibu at the time, so we just went down the hill to the Malibu vineyard and just to shut her up, just because it was like it was like, okay, great, here's church, right? And we went to church, and we met Jesus there, right? That's where we met something ancient
Mm.
and true, something true and universal and ancient there. That's how I'll say it now, but back then it would have been like, I gave my heart over to,
Mm-hmm.
whatever. um and then she started, I mean, I'll say prophesying, but I don't she started saying, I'm going to be healed. God said he's going to heal me. um and then she was healed. She had a glioblastoma, and I don't know if you guys know anything about, but those kill, and they kill fast. They are. It's what
Mm-hmm.
John McCain had. It's what you have, a GBM, a glioblastoma. You're done.
Mm.
And I mean, it was miraculous. Like her team at UCLA was astounded. So then that like so I say that this sets that story up because God was actually always a the best friend of mine. God is in that Christian, even within that Christian school, that context, that all of that, because God was Ellen's best friend, my sister's best friend.
Oh.
God was like Ellen would say, the first thing she'd say whenever she'd look at you and go, hi, I'm Ellen, do you know Jesus? Right? Like, and it was so annoying and embarrassing, but I trusted God. I loved God because I had actually witnessed some pretty insane shit.
Mm-hmm.
Like some pretty like, and this little kid, she's 2 years younger than I was, whose faith was unwavering even when she's like very ill,
Mm-hmm.
So that sets some like God was never anything that I tried to get away from.
Mm.
God was always something that felt like coming home,
Mm.
and very safe, and trust, good and hard, right? God is good and hard and always has been. I don't know that I've ever known God not to be good and hard. Um, then then I got sick. And I don't actually know why, but I didn't take that as I never felt anything bad against, like, I didn't hold that against God. And I don't know that I could tell you why, other than it just was, he was still my friend. They were still my friend. She was, whatever. God was still my friend.
Yeah.
And a trustworthy one, and a benevolent one, and a good one, and a fucking hard one. But on my team. And then there was a moment, like when they were harvesting my eggs in onco fertility after I had, before my bone marrow transplant, where I remember thinking, like, honestly, God, fuck you. Like, this part right here sucks. Fuck you for this part. Sorry.
Oh my goodness. Your tears are also a gift. They're
Okay.
sacred. Yeah.
They release cortisol. Did you guys know that?
Oh, I
That,
feel
like,
it. I believe you.
they release it, and they think that they fall heavier, so that, like, they fall slower. They're full of proteins, so that it forces another person to, like, actually see them, because they're falling slower. Isn't that so special?
So special, social, and sacred.
So then, but even then, it was, God is still my friend. Okay, great. God's my friend. I have journals in my basement that I was still talking to God every day in active addiction, like, still, like, begging for help, begging, but just had no clue how to find it, because no one models to us that, right? Especially back then.
Right.
And so then I got sober, and it was in surrounding myself with mystical thought, and with mystical thought, that I think that was kind of that was the Richard Rohr was a big one for me. Do you guys know Richard Rohr?
Oh, yes. Big fan.
Fuck with Rohr.
Big fan.
Yeah, dude. And honestly, the church we were a part of here, my husband was a deacon, was the church kind of, it's Denver Community Church. We've left it, like I said, about 10 years ago, but they exist knowing that the natural evolution of faith is deconstruction. And the natural evolution, church exists for a reason, and it's there, and it's beautiful, and it's a model for so many true, pure, good things in this world, right? And
yeah.
at a certain point, you come to really embody Christ, little Christ. That's Christian, right? You become the divine. You realize, oh, okay, I guess I am a little Christ. I guess I am connected to all of this. Okay, I don't know that I need to be in these walls anymore, to live in here anymore. And then we find our people, right? And we find the people who we can venture out into the wilderness with, and that's where I get my my peace now, is out in nature and out in the wilderness. And so, does that answer that?
It does so beautifully. Okay. I'm like feeling so much deep, we keep saying the word resonance, but that's just the word in my head, resonance to my own story of faith, and like I loved being a Christian and I loved that part of my life, and actually still love that part of me that's in there. And then as that deconstruction happened, there was a lot of pain about how a lot of the stories that were perpetuated by the institution of the church hurt me. But when you were just talking, I was thinking about the verse that like drew me in to faith was Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. And it just like struck me because I grew up in two homes that were very different, and I went back and forth between the two of them all the time, and nothing was the same in my life ever. And so this idea that somebody could be the same, and I was fractured. I actually learned, I've been talking about this a lot lately with friends, but I learned how to be who I needed to be in each house. So even I had no concept of being the same, And so this idea of Jesus was this anchor for me that I needed to know. And so I'm hearing you come full circle with like becoming Christ-like actually is like this door to freedom. Because I struggle with, some doctrine now where I'll say, I just don't believe we have separation from God. So then it's hard for me to reconcile with this Christ consciousness. Because if I don't believe I need penal substitutionary atonement, then what do I do with Christ? Like what do I do with him? But I actually think what you just said hit me so hard, because it's like you become that Christ consciousness, and then you are the one bridging your own like internal separation from God, the ways that we can like separate. And so that full circle moment of just like, yeah, the beauty that you have this friendship with God, that it's so deep and profound, but that it took on this new form when you met yourself more fully, is like, those are the parallel tracks that I'm tracking with you. I'm like, yes, I feel that so deeply. I think I needed to hear your arc to like even see my own mirrored back to me. So thank you.
Okay, a question.
Yes.
I don't know if I can. I have a
You
question.
can.
Have you done psychedelics? Can I ask that right now?
I have, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I don't know.
Not extensively, but yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That was. I mean, I the science behind psychedelics and how they support your subconscious is phenomenal, and I cannot wait for 30 years from now when it's standard of care for so many different things. Yes. Right?
Yeah.
But you talk about the Jesus, where do I put Jesus? And psychedelics really helped me get in my own divinity.
Yes.
And helped me. I think Jesus loved psychedelics. I'm just going to put that out there. Like, I think all those prophets and the people who wrote the Bible loved whatever kind of mushrooms they found. I think really worked for them. But I mean the psychedelics and doing my work, alongside psychedelics or mushrooms, I'll say psilocybin, really helped reconcile Christ for me in a way. That's a little side note for me.
Yeah.
Super interesting.
A little plug for the whole psychedelics. No, it's one of those things that, it takes you to a different part of your consciousness that especially, I don't say that flippantly or like as a blanket statement. I have a brother who's like very shamanic, and so he like has carried me through a lot of those experiences, and I felt very safe and held and supported. And so I would never just tell anybody.
It's like legit holy
it's
medicine.
very important work that needs to be treated really importantly, carefully. And so I'm glad you brought that piece in. There's definitely a part of that cracked open some of my reserve or some of my own stories about myself. And I'm so grateful, for the experiences, but also they're profound and deep, and it's good hard. That's good hard. That's what we'll say. Psychedelics are good hard. And
they're trips. When they say trip, it's a trip. And I don't do them around any, like, for me, it is scheduled. It is time where I'm like, fuck, really, God, I have to do psychedelic. Like, that's kind of how it is.
It's like a retreat. I mean, I treat it like I need a day, like before and after. There's time. Anyway, it's a whole thing. But I'm thinking about all the ways that we like envisioned even our conversation with you going, and I'm like, oh, there's so much sweetness to the depth here, because there's this spiritual aspect is so important. And you've said to us, like, you can't separate the science and the soul. And so I'm curious and like wanting to shift into maybe, like you talked about your sobriety, maybe some of your cancer journey and this like process that moved you into some of your work that you're doing now.
Bodies.
You're
gonna let me talk about bodies?
Please do.
Please.
And nervous
thank you.
systems and nerves and everything.
Just geek out on it.
We're getting cozy now.
We're crossing our legs.
No, okay, so remember that therapist who said,
yes.
So this therapist who taught me resourcing, her name was Venetia. I had chronic pain. I had a candy cap sticker. I was like hobbling and used a cane. Did I say cane? Yeah. And like all that, like it was awful. It was awful. It was hell. I was trapped, scar tissue everywhere, fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, several other autoimmune disorders, um, shooting nerve pain down my left leg, just visceral, because when you have radiation, it scars your organs too. So you can't breathe. I couldn't breathe. I had, it was awful. Um, so this therapist and my story was one of my stories was if you want love you have to be broken, or if I'm broken I will get love. And so that's what I'm right, and internally I'm thinking, okay, so broken, right? I was very identified with that story. All subconscious. No one's gonna say like, yeah, I know I'm gonna choose to be really broken and sad and like sick,
Mm-hmm.
and no, it's subconscious.
Yeah.
um so this therapist, and we're working through chronic pain, and she goes, have you ever been touched? Like, has anyone ever touched you? Like, do you get massage work? Like, what's going, like, you can't use meds anymore. And I went and got a massage like 2 weeks later, and I started seeing a chiropractor. And and I I could I my understanding was of massage was like they're going to dig into my muscles. And I don't know that I actually even ever gotten a massage until that point. And that was, I'm 36 now. That was probably around 27, whatever at the time. Um, and I couldn't get a hug. Hugs hurt me. So they're telling me massage, and I'm like, absolutely not. So I do a little bit of research, and I find this, and God, whatever, universe, subconscious, aligned, God, my subconscious, God's, all whatever, everything begins to fall in front of me because I open up to it, and I have these body workers who begin to change my life, and they're in my port scar, and they're working viscerally inside, like visceral manipulation, and I I begin to feel better, I begin to feel better. Energy is discharging, cell polarity is stabilizing. It's a real thing I'm coming to learn, right? And then at one point again, I look at my husband and I'm like, I think I need to go to massage school. I had gone to art school. I had to leave early because I got cancer, and so I had like some college, whatever, but I was an artist, and then I went to massage school, and what they say about massage school is you go to massage school thinking you're going to learn how to heal other people, but really you're going to learn how to heal yourself and how to like come home. And that, man, that started everything. Um, it was, I did that. And then I went back to then I did extra. I was like, maybe I want to be a doctor. Actually, I don't know that I know this much about bodies. I want to go learn this much about bodies. So then I went to pre-med, and pre-med, I didn't know this, but has a lot of psych courses too. and so now I'm learning about psychology and cellular biology and synapse spaces between nerves, and how transmitters play in there, and what those transmitters mean, and my entire world blew apart, like when I was, and then I realized, oh, I actually have what I need here. I don't want, I did a couple shifts, couple rounds as a CNA, and I was like, nope, I don't, this isn't actually where I want to be, even though I had been raised in hospitals and like thought I knew what they were about. Absolutely not. And so then it was just bodies. It's been bodies for, yeah, over 5 years now.
What was that moment of like, I got what I need? What did you get? What was the what was that
Yeah.
knowing
I mean,
that?
that was the birth of Cell Store. Like truly, that moment, that day, it was one day.
Okay.
Um, yeah, it was the
Big day.
beginning. Pardon?
It's a big day.
Big
Just
day. I
changes
mean,
the
Big
truly.
whole,
day.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the biggest day.
Yeah.
The beginning, the AM lecture was a neuroanatomy course, and I might cry when I talk about it. And they walked through, my instructor is walking us through what happens between what happens in synapse spaces, so where nerves meet other nerves, what parts of the brain are producing all these transmitters that become emotions, and thoughts and feelings, right? That our thoughts are not actually just thoughts. They become 3D things in our body, and then are floating around in our aquarium. So I'm learning about, like, okay, this, right, my brain is producing this and this, and that's going systemic via these, this and this. And then there was this whole thing on pain and the difference between felt pain and not felt pain. And I'm in this lecture learning about the difference between nociception, the body's like the brain registering pain, and our felt sensation of pain, and how inherent to the felt sensation of pain is emotion.
And I
And
believe that.
like truth, like you cannot separate pain from emotion. And here is my like science, my biology instructor saying that. And I knew that from my work as a massage therapist, right? I'd seen that there's trauma informed touch, there's nervous system, right? All that stuff. Like I knew that as a practitioner, but now here's a biologist saying that, and that got me going. And then there was a break, so that was that class, right? Then I had this break, and I started reading these studies on nociception and how the brain feel, how the body feels pain, how the brain registers pain, how involved emotion and psychological health is in our physical felt, sensation of pain. And I couldn't deny it. I have a handicap sticker in my car at this point, and I'm already like 5 years, I'm like way sober. So here I am thinking, oh, I've done all the emotional work. I'm good. Like, like I've been in therapy forever. But I can't kick that there are still some parts of me that hurt still, that I still do feel fibro-y or get flared up every now and then, right? And then so there was that first lecture. I read these studies, and then I have a psych lecture on epigenetics. Epigenetics was part of that lecture. It was a couple other things too. And there was an Amoeba Sisters. Have you ever heard of Amoeba Sisters?
No.
Oh my God, all the bio people out there are just gonna be smiling so big right now. Amoeba Sisters are great. But their little video on epigenetics, I'm watching it right after having learned all this stuff about how our anatomy and physiology handles stress hormones. I watched this video about epigenetics and how these stress hormones are impacting our DNA, our epigenome, but the way that they're talking about it was framed in this it was framed that all these external sources are what change our epigenome, right? So stuff like exposure to sunlight or smoking, and it's the twin study. That's it, right? The twin study. One twin will smoke and look like shit, and the other twin won't, and she'll look not like shit. But that's there. It's all these external things, what you eat and everything. But in my mind, I'm thinking, wait, stress hormones I can be locked in a room with nothing external happening to me at all. And I just learned about the HPA axis and how my body is releasing these hormones, these proteins, these molecules of emotion, as Candace Pert calls them. And I just saw how cortisol directly impacts my genome. And it had nothing to do with anything going on around me. It had everything to do with what my brain is perceiving is going on around me.
Wow.
So, and that's the basis of trauma work, right? I'm not still getting hit by my mom. I'm not still getting whipped. But there's a version of, that wound. I've organized a lot, or I had organized a lot of story around that abuse, that trauma. I'm not still getting, ports ripped out of me, but I'm still does that make
Yes.
Makes so
so
much
that
sense.
day,
Yeah.
that day I went home and I cut my handicap sticker up that exact day, because I was like, shit, I gotta fix this.
Wow.
I gotta get these stories. And that was the birth of Cell Story.
Wow, which Cell Story is the work you do in the world educating people, and
Yes.
you're writing a book as well, right?
Yeah, and the Cell Story is they're separate, and I'm probably leaning more into Good Hard Good. That's the name of my book. It's due out next
Good
spring.
Hard
But Cell Story
Good.
Was developed more for me.
Sure,
Like
yep.
this is what healed me, and then it just naturally became a part of how I was teaching the lymphatic course that I teach too. And students began to be way more interested in Cell Story material than lymphatic material. And so I gave this is my last term as the lymphatic teacher.
Oh.
I now I like I go around and
Okay, question. So that's
Yes.
such a beautiful story of just going home and cutting up your handicap plaque. I'm curious, you mentioned you were holding the story that in order to be loved, you had to be broken. So was it the Cell Story work you just described that helped you rewrite that story? And if so, what is your new story? And how did you shift that? Yeah.
So the old story is, if I'm broken, I need to be broken is essentially what it is, right? Broken. Claire is broken. And so Claire, that was an organizational schema for Claire, right? I mean, truly, that I would call that a deliverance that day. That was like, it was something so clear for me that I immediately was like, oh no, Claire is human. That's like, Claire's not broken. Claire is human, right? And so then, for me, a lot of it's low back stuff. So, I have a history of, like, my back used to go out every 6 months, and I would be on bed rest for like 2 weeks. And I have 4 children, and my work requires my body, so it's a very impactful thing for when my back goes out. And I would live in terror of my back going out. And then as my nervous system regulated, as I'm healing, as I'm developing this new way of thinking for me, right? As I'm trying to wrestle through a new story, it looks like every time. So this is what it looks like real time right now, right? So if my back's, I just organized my garage. That would have laid me out 5 years ago, and I'm like fine right now. If I feel that little twinge, right? If I start to feel that eek, I can choose to slip back into the I am broken. And then my what does that do? I'm broken. And then we spiral, right? Then it's, I'm broken. If I'm broken, I'm on bed rest. If I'm on bed rest, my kids aren't going to, blah, 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 blah. Okay.
Cortisol.
And then what's in my aquarium? What's in my interstitial fluid? Cortisol, epinephrine, norepinephrine, adrenaline, like all these, my belief of I am broken is impacting my biology, right? My biology is believing me to the point where it's impacting my genome. Cortisol binds to the protein that our genetic code is wrapped around, and it impacts how. So not only am I thinking I'm broken, I actually genetically become broken. Does that make, like, I'm replicating? I now have a genome that is every cell I make is being born in the story I am broken.
Wow.
Okay, so I then become the thing I think I am. So I can either choose, like, blah 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 blah, right? Okay, it's a shit storm inside. Or I can notice, right? Bessel van der Kolk in Body Keeps the Score says there's only 2 things we have to do: notice that and decide what happens next. So I can notice, oh, there's that. I don't know. Do you guys have little triggers in your body? Like,
yes.
Yeah.
The alarm's going off. It's not even an alarm. The little twinge. Yeah.
Yeah. There it is. Oh, there it is. Okay. Okay. We embody, we regulate. What's true? What's true is that in this moment, right now, I am okay. I am okay. So what starts to happen? What's true, and this is when I give the self story, it's what's truer, because the true thing is my back still does hurt. I'm not going to ignore or reject that.
Mm-hmm.
There still is a real thing that is hard happening. There's a truer thing happening though. And nervous systems require truth. And the truer thing is I'm okay. I can rest. I'm okay. I can rest. I can do this right now. I can just tweak it a little bit. I'm okay. I can rest. I am whole. I have the help I need. I am safe. I am loved. I am whole. I am good. Everything's okay. And as I'm saying those things, what am I doing? What am I doing up in my brain? Oxytocin, dopamine, serotonin, other, like acetylcholine, all these beautiful things that actively changes my interstitium, my aquarium, my body. So my biology believes me. I then become okay. I then become, but that confrontation, that moment requires more courage than I think. It's the sobriety moment. That's right. It's the I'm not going to abandon you here. Truer thing. I'm not going to the future version of me who is okay, who is whole, who's healed. I won't abandon her either. I'm not going to abandon the broken, hard human part of me, but I'm not going to abandon my divine, glorious, like goddess who doesn't have pain and who floats through her. No, I'm going to be all of it. I have to look at all of it. So that's how that looks.
Beautiful. We're both like hands on our heart. It's beautiful. It is this like perfect segue into like your work and self story. We've been mentioning self story. That's like would you call it a workshop that a workshop that you teach. And we're actually going to have Claire back next week, and we're going to talk about self story and what that means. But it feels like this is like a cliffhanger, almost like your biology believes you is like, we need to like sit with that for a second. It's so major, but I love that also you have an offering for us, for our listeners, and for yourself and for people you teach of like, okay, what do we do if that's true? If our biology believes us, what are some practical things we can do? And so we're going to have Claire back, and she's going to get into that. But I'm just like,
I'm so grateful. Thank you so much for sharing your story, for sharing your tears, for sharing your heart, for sharing your hard and your good. There's a few words pinging in my brain, like your acceptance that you're wounded, not wicked, helped build a bridge to your biology in a new way. And so I'm super excited for part 2 to dig into a bit more of what that looks like. But thank you for just sharing your heart and letting us and our listeners get to know you a bit better.
I'm so stoked.
If people want to follow you, where can they find you? On Instagram or your website? What are your things?
Instagram I'm active on. I have a wait list right now for Cell Story locally in Denver, but I'm working on the virtual option.
Okay.
I'm in this like hunker mode a little bit right now because I am writing this book and the deadlines are getting realer. But I'm around. I'm around.
Well, we'll tag all your things, and we'll make sure people who want to find you can. But we just want to make sure we put that out there too. Well, we will be back with you, so we're so excited. But as we wrap up today, we just want to remind you and remind ourselves that you are an absolute badass and the most fragile thing. So treat yourself as both. Thanks, Claire.
Thank you, guys.